Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Ellen Alderman. I am Deputy Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs here at the Grant Foundation. We are so pleased to have you all here with us this evening for a lecture by archaeologist Dr. Tasha Vorderstrasse. Presented in conjunction with Atlas Unlimited, a grant-funded exhibition currently on view at the Logan Center Gallery by artist Karthik Pandian and choreographer Andros Zins-Browne. Tonight's talk concerns this fragment of sculpture found in the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra. We are very fortunate to be able to secure the loan of the fragment for this evening and to welcome Dr. Vorderstrasse, who joins us from the Oriental Institute at the University of Chicago, where she focuses on the Near East and questions of identity and cultural exchange. Following tonight's talk, we'll host a brief Q&A and discussion, after which we'd love to invite you all downstairs to continue the conversation over a glass of wine in the library. The galleries and workshop will be open late, so I urge you to take this opportunity to see our current exhibition, Eternal Gradient, which features the work of Oriental and Madlener House, and take advantage of 10% off everything in the bookshop. And with that, I would like to just briefly remind you to please silence your phones and to please join me in welcoming Dr. Tasha Vorderstrasse.
Всем добрый вечер и спасибо. Я бы хотела воспользоваться предоставленной мне возможностью и поблагодарить Semyona Semyonovича Abimelech Lazarian и его жену Марию Павловну Demidovу благодаря щедрости, которая мы смогли провести эти раскопки. Также я хотела бы выразить благодарность факультету славистики Университета Чикаго за их безграничную помощь, особенно при транспортировке скульптуры в Чикаго. Это впервые публичное представление объекта широкой публики, и для нас большая честь провести его в Чикаго. Hello everyone, and thank you, Ellen. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the generosity of Semyonovich Abimelech Lazarian and his wife, Maria Pavlovna Demidova, who made these excavations possible. I would also like to thank the Department of Slavic Studies of the University of Chicago for their continued support of this project, particularly in transporting the sculpture to Chicago. This is the first time the object will be seen in public, and it is a great honor that we are able to do this here. I am pleased to join in this 21st century enterprise, not only because of my interest in Palmyra, but also in the modern theater. It is a sort of cultural center suited to Palmyra's historical and cultural background and character. This was my first visit to Palmyra, and I was honored to come and see the beauty that was, and to try and understand the character of the nature that made it beautiful, and to attempt, by any means in my power, to keep it alive. I'm very excited to be here to present the first results of our excavations at Palmyra in free Syria, and to have the unique opportunity to show the object itself in my lecture. Thanks are due to the free Syrian government and their generosity in allowing the viewing of this object so soon after it was found. In this talk, I will first discuss the excavations and circumstances of the find before moving to the find itself, and my attempts to place it in its historical context. I will conclude with some outstanding questions about the find. There is also a short publication which I have prepared about the find, and this will make the discovery more widely available to study by other scholars who may be able to make some new conclusions about it. I should also mention the table that the statue is sitting on has been specifically made in the style of 12th, 13th century ceramic tables from the site of Raqqa in honor of our Circassian builders at Palmyra, whom I'll speak of more shortly. The ruins of Palmyra are undoubtedly amongst the most romantic relics of the ancient world. Nowhere are there ruins which can compare with them. There is an exotic savor about them which we find nowhere else. I have read many descriptions of the city before my first visit, and had looked upon them as purple patches of romantic writings. Yet, I must admit that I fell under the spell of the same enchantment which all previous travelers experienced when, after a long journey across the desert, the outlines of her tower tomb mausoleums first became visible against the horizon, then slowly detached themselves from a smoke-like film of wind-blown sand, until, at last, the columns and arches stood clear-cut before me against the gray-gold background of the desert. This was made all the more remarkable by the fact that travelers can now reach Palmyra swiftly in a four-door air-conditioned Lada Priora or a hydrogen Marusha and put up in a comfortable hotel, whereas 20 years ago or so, before the reconstruction, the journey was made on camelback over days or weeks and in the company of an armed guide. I was also very honored to take part in the rescue excavations at Palmyra, since the Oriental Institute has had a long-standing interest in the Roman Near East. In 1920, James Henry Breasted, our esteemed founder, risked his life to uncover wall paintings which had been found at the site of Dur Europos on the Euphrates, located not that far from Palmyra. His spectacular finds were documented in his magnum opus, The Oriental Forerunners of Byzantine Painting, and set the stage for further exploration and excavation of the site. Breasted meant to return, but his many commitments prevented that, and thus the Oriental Institute largely ceased exploring this pivotal region. Thanks to an invitation from the Polish Academy of Sciences, however, the Oriental Institute staff, including myself, are now able to join their Russian colleagues who have been excavating at Palmyra for on and off about 100 years. And in this endeavor, we're ably assisted by the local Circassian builders who, as we will see, proved particularly pivotal to the excavation. The construction of a new theater at Palmyra by the Syrian government, with the help of the Russian architect Natalia Solovyeva, next to the the Russian architect Natalia Solovyova, next to the old theater was always going to be a controversial move. But this is mitigated by the fact that the building celebrates the glorious days of the Arabian Nights, and the results reach beyond a mere auditorium. The designs here revive the natural beauty of form, the ancient crafts of ceramics and metal, and the use of ground that produced the architecture of the Middle East. Further, the use of highly enhanced virtual reality technologies in this new theater would allow audiences to immersively experience the ancient Palmyra of Queen Zenobia. When the Circassian builders were clearing the site for construction team, they hit something almost immediately. Luckily, the Circassians realized it was something important thanks to their extensive experience excavating medieval ceramics at Raqqa, which was the inspiration for the table, as I mentioned, and elsewhere since the 19th.
Sorry, Karina, remember that part in brackets, which was the inspiration? That's an aside, like a casual aside. We've done this before. Can we take it back from luckily?
Luckily, the Circassians realized that it was something important, thanks to their extensive experience excavating medieval ceramics at Raqqa, which was the inspiration for the table, as I mentioned, and elsewhere since the 19th century. The piece had narrowly avoided destruction by Circassian pickaxe. Construction work was halted, and we immediately flew out to the site to investigate further. The ancient sculpture was still in situ, resting in a deep pit, waiting to be discovered. As I stood atop the gaping pit where it lay, the Circassian builders gently brushed away sand. Slowly, the animal head emerged into the light once more. First, I could only see the tip of its nose, and immediately I began to think, what would be more perfect than a camel sculpture at Palmyra? I could imagine it in a monumental palace decorated with sculptures, including, of course, a giant camel sculpture. As more and more of the head was gradually uncovered by the builders, I realized I was going to have to go down into the pit and investigate further. Of course, I couldn't use the rickety ladder that they had in place, but luckily, the Circassian builders carved into the bulk, and I was able to descend by steps of earth into the trench. Once inside, I realized it was not at all what I expected. As the last brushstrokes of sand were uncovered by the Circassians, the lavishly robust sculpture I pictured suddenly ended. And all I had was a head. A head. And indeed, looking at it close up, my skin went cold as I realized it wasn't ancient at all. But this made me wonder, if it wasn't ancient, why was it there at all, buried so deep in the earth? a few more mysteries soon followed. Particularly, the style and appearance of the sculpture closely recalled the Teltina camel head that I recently uncovered in the storage at the Oriental Institute Museum. But despite the superficial similarities, that sculpture dates to the Iron Age II period, and we have very little Iron Age material from Palmyra. Also, Neo-Hittite material is made from basalt, and this was from limestone. And in any case, upon examination, it was clear that this had been made in part by modern power tools. When we sifted the dirt around it, we found modern cigarette butts.
Very nice. Sorry. Okay, I think this word modern doesn't work because we're oversaying it. So just cut, we found modern cigarette butts. Just cut modern. So we found cigarette butts. I think that's self-explanatory.
But Sami, I think that she's going to want to specify that it's modern, otherwise people might be
Yeah, we
confused.
already specified in the previous line. So I think it's just repetition for no reason.
But
It's a lot of heavy wording. I think it's just.
But I think her motivation is to make it more clear, and if she doesn't, the audience might become confused.
No, but the previous sentence has modern power tools. And then you get, we found modern, there's no need for modern twice. I think we get the idea. It's something fast. And that way it keeps your flow too. You're doing great with it. Just can we take it again from when we sipped it? Please. Thank you.
When we sifted the dirt around it, we found cigarette butts, ironically of the Camel brand, and a Zippo lighter, as well as coins from the 2020s, which again pointed to a more recent origin for the piece. The presence of more recent material on archaeological sites is not completely unusual, even if most archaeologists don't care to study what they refer to as the post-interesting period. Indeed, even among people who study the more recent past, there is a tendency to dismiss 19th to 21st century material, but particularly 21st century, as being too recent to be worthy of study. In fact, some archaeologists have felt strongly enough about permanently removing recent material that they blew it up with dynamite to get to the earlier layers below. Happily, this was not the case here, but when we received the phone call, we were told that the object was at least Roman in date. So if it wasn't Roman or ancient at all, but rather quite recent, why was it there at all?
Sorry. This part with the question, she needs to confront the audience, right? So if it wasn't Roman or ancient, quite recent, you need to find someone. That's a good thing.
But
Why was it there at all? And then.
But Sami, I'm worried that if she's too confrontational, she'll lose the audience.
No. I think sometimes when archaeologists give lectures, it gets to a certain point. You know, they wanna find something that they directed the audience to get them interested in that. Because people lose attention all the time, especially when they dense material like that. So I think like she uses that sometimes, not too much, because she's not a very confrontational person. But
Yeah, because that's my worry, is that people are going to, feel like she's trying too hard.
no, but I think she's experienced at this point because she's done this a lot. So she knows how to use some of these tactics effectively sometimes, but like not too much. So I think I just want to throw that one in, particularly in the middle. So I think that's it. So can we take it again? So if it wasn't Roman or ancient.
So, if it wasn't Roman or ancient at all, but rather quite recent, why was it there at all? archaeological sites are reused in later periods as graveyards for everything that gets tossed out. And therefore, it's not. But in this instance, the object seemed more surprising than just some trash. But what was it? One can always fall back on the old reason archaeologists use, which is that it was ritual in some way. For us archaeologists, a ritual object basically means an object we have no idea about. But even ritual objects have something uncovered nearby that it seems to relate to. Here, there was nothing. Was this a piece constructed for tourists and then discarded because it was faulty in some way? It seems rather large, however, for a tourist to bring home. Another possibility I considered was that it was a joke or deliberately planted at the site to masquerade as an antiquity for some reason. But since the find was announced, there has been no reaction from anyone. If it was a hoax of some sort, like the Piltdown Man, we would have expected that. Or perhaps it was related to the people living in the hundreds of poor huts of Circassians that were built over and around the main temple in the last 10 years that have only recently been cleared. But there is no indication that this is the case. Therefore, we are left with a mystery. Despite not being ancient, the statue does seem to be connected, in subject matter at least, to Roman statuary from Palmyra. The head of the statue, though broken, may be a camel, although some of my colleagues have argued that a bear is more likely. This seems to me less likely, given that bears are extremely rare in Syria today and would not have been living in the desert climate of Palmyra for at least the past several hundred years. Therefore, I think that a camel is much more likely. Like the sea, the desert not only divides, it also joins, for it is a thoroughfare open to trade from every side. It has even created the means of transport for this trade, that ship of the desert, the camel. Camels are very popular in Palmyran funerary reliefs, for example.
We need more passion in this because it's very poetic. So it needs to be very big. You know, just to shred. I know your character today would have been rehearsing a lot, but just power through this last run. I really need.
But Sami, I wanted to get through the whole run without an interruption, and you keep interrupting.
No, I know, and I want to get through it the same way, but I really need to see like the performance. I really need you to drag it through. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't help.
But Sami, I feel like that's what I'm doing.
Just a little bit more. I know you've been working hard, but I need just a little more. This is the last one through. You know, just give it a little more. You're doing good. Your rhythm is perfect. You're blocking, but I just need a little more, you know, romanticizing. Just to this part, like a crescendo. Remember? You said this.
No.
It needs to escalate.
But
Just we need to get this. Please do this one. All right. Can we take it back from like the sea, please?
like the sea, the desert not only divides, it also joins, for it is a thoroughfare of open trade from every side.
Beautiful. That's it.
It has even created camels are very popular in Palmyran funerary reliefs. For example, frequently lurking over the shoulders of deceased Palmyrines. Palmyra was, of course, a popular caravan route, clearly on the crossroads of trade, and of course, the camel played an important role in the transport of these goods. The importance of camels in commerce meant that they played a highly visible role in Palmyran art. It is the caravan trade that led to Palmyra having an amazingly rapid development into one of the wealthiest, most luxurious, most elegant towns in Syria. One could almost imagine that she had sprung from the desert sands with the wave of a magic wand. So rapidly was the old and apparently small and unpretentious temple of the village of Tadmor transformed into Palmyra.
Lovely.
The fragment here is indeed made out of the same type of stone as the Roman Palmyran material. But there does not seem to have been an attempt to deceive for profit. Or, if so, the forger was either not very good because he didn't imitate the precise style of Palmyran funerary reliefs, or else was heavily influenced by another style of stone carving. There have, of course, been lots of groups coming in and out of Palmyra recently, including, of course, not just the Circassians, who have been resettled by the Russians, but also an influx of workers from all over the world due to the so-called Russian reconstruction of Palmyra in 2028. Despite the well-documented failures of the whole reconstruction project, not to mention the slow decay to which Palmyra has gradually succumbed.
Sorry. I really have to do this. So, this part, because you're talking about failure, you need to dial it down. Just a little bit. Just your pitch. Your rhythm is great. It's fantastic. Fabulous. But, you know, the previous part was all excitement, and you're very excited about what you're saying. This part, you're talking about some of the failures, about the reconstruction. So it can be dialed down a little bit because we need to get the contrast of the two emotional states.
But Sami, I thought I had dialed it back.
I mean, you did, but I need more, like more contrast, because I need to see the extremes of the two emotional states. And then we can find the balance in between. So just drive that a bit more. Dial it down a bit more. The rhythm is great. Keep the rhythm. Keep the rhythm. Just dial down the pitch and the energy.
Okay. I'll try, but I still think I'm doing it fine.
You are. But just a notch bit. So can you take it from despite the well-documented?
Despite the well-documented failures of the whole reconstruction project, not to mention the slow decay to which Palmyra has gradually succumbed since 2028, and unchecked robbery of new ruins of Palmyra carried out by tourists and merchants alike, we do know more or less what is Palmyran and what is not. The strange thing is that this head both is and is not from Palmyra. The coins uncovered nearby the object can be dated to the 2020s, arguing very strongly that the statue was buried sometime around 2027. I would argue that 2028 is the most likely date, given the collapse of the stage of what was then called the state-of-the-art theater as part of the inauguration events for the Free Syrian Museum of Modern Art and Casinos. This could suggest that the head was part of the Arabian Nights sculpture on the roof that tragically fell down, crushing the stage and several performers below. We know from the architectural plans that the sculptures were too heavy for the supports and had been cheaply made with local materials. But I always heard they were made from metal, not stone. In any case, this would still not account for the fact that the body of this animal has yet to be recovered. Or else, perhaps the head was a prop unto itself, a prop from the production staged.
مرحبا، أنا اسمي زكريا المطلق. أنا نحات من مدينة تدمر. بصراحة أنا من مدينة حمص، بس اليوم قالوا لي لازم أقول إنه أنا من مدينة تدمر. Hello everyone, my name is Zakaria al-Mutlaq. I'm a sculptor from Palmyra. Actually I'm from Homs, but they told me tonight I should say that I'm from Palmyra. That's how my speech started. Some people laughed at the time. For me, it wasn't that funny. During the regime, I was made to say all kind of lies on a video that I was paid to tell the international media about the atrocities going on and faking all the news from Syria for my own enrichment. And I was even made to make all kind of fake sculpture while the regime sold off the original to collectors and museum by replacing the fake sculpture I made. The only things I promised myself that night was I won't lie, no matter what. And the translator says to me right before I go up on stage, Zakaria, tell them that you are from Palmyra, that you are a sculptor from Palmyra. I'm a sculptor. I'm from Homs. My family had an atelier in Palmyra. I used to spend long days in the Palmyra Museum with my uncle Khalid, or as his Wikipedia page calls him, Khalid al-Asad. For me, he was just Uncle Khalid. He was the director of the museum, that's true. Neither him nor the objects in this museum survived the invasion in 2015. That's also true. In 2016, Russia declared victory over ISIS in Palmyra and staged a concert in the Roman theater there. They hired a Russian national symphony to play in Palmyra. They played Mozart, Bach, Shostakovich, you know, the usual Syrian hits. And then televised a victory speech from Vladimir Putin. 12 years later, after President Assad was died, and the war that Putin had celebrated being over was actually over, they invited me back. So this was winter 2028. They call it the reconstruction. There were a bunch of us artists, urban planners, architects, all Syrian asked to come back and help rebuild Palmyra. They called the cultural oasis of the desert. At first, I was honored to make a monument to our freedom, and I felt good to get my hand on stone again. But again, it became clear very soon that I was being asked to lie. The base they had me make had the Syrian flag with a Russian pear in the middle. A fucking pear! Did you ever see a pear in Syria? They spoke about the future partnership of our two countries and how we'll be free now thanks to them. There were these curators and collectors visiting my atelier. But the questions they were asking me were weird. Like, what if you change this or that? What if you make it this way or this? What if? I started to wonder who these people were and if they were really getting in my head or not. The unveiling ceremony was too much for me though. And I knew from the first moment the announcer said, "Dobra večer," I felt this rage building up in me. So, a few years ago, I'm in my cell, and the guards told me, "Zakaria, you get a call." I jumped up. I thought maybe it was my parents. It turned out it was some young Syrian director. He learned about my story and wanted to base a drama on it. He's from Damascus, educated in London and Chicago, he says. Nice. Well, I wish I could be there with you all tonight, but you know, there's no way for me to get a visa for Chicago these days. So, anyway guys, is that pretty much what you wanted me to say?
Thank you all for being here. At this point, I'd like to invite Karthik and Andros to come up and join us for a Q&A and discussion. Do you guys want to get started maybe explaining a little bit what happened tonight?
What happened to I'm wondering myself. So we've been working, my name's Andros Zins-Browne. We're working on, we're working on an exhibition that's at the Logan Center, University of Chicago. And two of the people that we're working with, we're here for you tonight. Tasha K Vorderstrasse and Sami Ismat. And so this event tonight is a kind of offshoot of the exhibition, which is also activated with performances regularly every Thursday. That's the outer scope of what we're doing tonight.
So we know Tasha, we know Sami. Who's Zachariah? How does he play it?
So we've kind of we've been working with the concept of a builder. That's something that you heard Tasha use in her script, and usually we refer to that as someone who's working in construction. But we've tried to actually expand thinking about what labor is in this project, to thinking about material labor and all types of work. So we're calling all of our collaborators in this project, which was sort of started in Belgium with 2 exhibitions, and now is in Chicago at the Logan Center, and then is moving to ADWSC in New York in the fall, and sort of works travel throughout these shows. They migrate themselves as they also speak about movement and all of its sort of exigencies. And Zachariah is a builder who really is at the very core and center of this project. I think it's fair to say that there's no Atlas without Zachariah. We met him in the summer of 2017, and we began working with him on writing stories that were loosely based on his own biography, but we worked together to sort of deviate from things that had actually happened to him to build out a kind of larger world and a context in which possible futures and pasts could kind of come together in a weirded present. And we're working a lot with these kinds of concepts of moving through space and time, and particularly with Zachariah's story. I think that what we came to realize was that, especially when the kind of category of refugee is projected onto someone, we bring so much baggage even as spectators, or we actually really project so much already onto someone when we hear that term, that the ways that we work tonight that you saw, and the ways that we're continuing to work with Zachariah, with Sami, with Tasha and the other builders, has to do with speculating around and away from really concrete realities, but to imagine different past and futures.
Factually, he's a sculptor.
Another way to say that.
He's a sculptor, and he's from Syria. And as you heard tonight, there's some debate as to whether he's from Homs or from Palmyra. But he has made his way to Belgium, where we met him. And he is the person who made and also destroyed this sculpture.
Where is the rest of the sculpture? Is there a rest of the sculpture?
It's a good question.
A lot of it is actually on the south side of Chicago right now at the Logan Center Gallery. And we have another we have many of our builders in the house tonight, I must say. We can say what's up to them throughout the evening. But Jane Foley, who's a conservator based here in Chicago, has a conservation studio, is actually working with the rest of, not the rest actually, but other fragments of the same sculpture. And tonight is actually the first time that Jane is seeing the head. Yeah. How's that going for you,
It's
Jane?
the first time I saw the orientation also. So that's interesting for me.
How is this
Well,
encounter
because
going for you?
I've been trying to work on something you said yesterday, and now I realise I had it the wrong way up. So that's good.
So just to give you a sense of some of the things that happen at the Logan Center, for example, is that every Thursday during these activations, all the builders have different shifts. So Jane's there from 3 to 6 p.m. every Thursday, and she's working on piecing the sculpture back together and also telling stories that relate to the sculpture and her own experiences with fragmentation and destruction in the field.
Are they scripted stories? Or are they stories?
I wouldn't say they're scripted. I mean, tonight was obviously a highly theatrical event, which I'm personally very fond of. But in the gallery, I would say that the interactions are generally non-scripted, although we worked a lot on what the topics of discussion were, and what the themes might have been. But I don't know, I think the builders could probably say better how that's developed as that's gone on. I mean, they don't have, well, Sami has a script. I think you're the only one, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you want to say a second about what you're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, I did start with the script that I'm workshopping in the exhibition, and the script is Zachariah's story. So I'm trying to workshop Zachariah's story in the exhibition, and I act out some of it, and I do that interactively with people, visitors, as they walk in. I sometimes work with them on scenes, and I myself sometimes perform the scene. And then interesting things happen. So sometimes I take phrases from the script, and I find something that's there at the Logan in the hallway, or something that the person is wearing, and then an entire new narrative comes out of that. You know, I improvise it, and then, you know, there are moments where people are not sure if this is happening now or is part of the script, and I think that becomes interesting for me to play with.
Certainly was tonight.
So what happens after New York? Do you have a plan? In other words, is the nature of the project such that you're not quite sure where it goes as you kind of proceed?
That's what that deep, yeah.
Plan.
That's what that deep, worried breath meant.
No, it's just I mean, one of the things we have been working on is, like Karthik said, the idea of vibration, not just in terms of people, but also things or stories, ways that things and stories and people come together, break apart, reform, and so on. And so what you see here are sort of fragments and reconstructions of works from earlier shows, or earlier iterations of this show. And New York will continue that. So some of the works that you see in Chicago will be shipped to New York and also reconfigured. Also in situ during opening. So the idea is that the exhibition is also in some kind of ongoing process. What exactly that process will be between now and October, it's not unknown purposefully, but it's unknown as a matter of fact. So
There's a lot of known unknowns. But it's also that in the kind of like exigencies of movement and unpredictable stuff that were like encounters that end up shaping the work, there's always very highly local interactions between like what's moving and what is very specific to the place that we're working in. This is actually a really good example of that. The image that you see here. The work is sort of loosely broken up into this act structure. So this was the very beginning of the project, Act 1, Carnival. And there, we were working with Zachariah's story, yet we actually did our site visit to this small city called Aalst in Belgium the weekend of the yearly carnival. I mean, that they actually take more seriously than I think any city other than Rio and New Orleans, it seems, because like this tiny city, you know, throws this gigantic 3-day bacchanal with 80 gigantic floats and choreographed dances and costumes. It was huge. It was really impressive. It was like, okay, well, we can't compete with this, so we have to work with this. So we actually, no joke, we encountered a crew called Deloisemannen who had made a gigantic camel the size of this room as their float that year. So we sort of enlisted them as builders. We bought the float from them, and it was a sort of like the star ritualistic sculpture, which Tasha will tell you means nothing. Rightly probably here in this case. But this is an example of that. And you'll also see fragments of that head in other parts of the
basically, we paraded the whole camel through the city of Aalst with the choreography that we made and a song that we commissioned Egypt. And then they decapitated this gigantic styrofoam head as part of the performance. And then that had stood in the gallery during that exhibition, and like Karthik was saying, now you'll see some fragments of that head in the show at Logan.
Could you address the political content? I mean, with those ancient political issues that could bring up Circassians over and over again. Of course, I have a very long history with that part of the world. And then, of course, the present horrors that occurred in the site that we were discussing. And I suppose the potential future Russian-Syrian interaction. So could you, I don't know, obviously you're thinking about that. It's an aura that hangs around everything you do. So could you talk about that a bit, or do you not want to talk about it?
Could you repeat the question?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I couldn't hear it.
Okay, I was asking about the political content because there's an ancient political content in the discussion of the Circassians and the relationship to that region. And then the present or recent past in which that site was a scene of horrific actions by ISIS, and then the future involvement of Russia and Syria. All of these kind of emanate around the performance. And I was wondering if you want to talk about that. Yeah, you don't.
I think that one of the motivations for us in this project, and especially, I think like, well, I'll say a couple things. Like, one is the way that we're trying to work, and the way that we're trying to forge kind of a really big, messy, complicated family and community in the making of it feels like the most political action in, like the most precisely political action in the project. And for me, I would say that because I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to say what is political and what is not, or where is politics, right? When even if you take, when you take a sort of a situation like what, like both the sort of like the physical acts that ISIS was executing, but then also the images that we're making, right? The kind of lines between image production and action have become so blurry and confusing, I think, and yet there are so many people for which there are such clear thresholds for when it stops being about images, right? When you are a victim of violence, when you are exposed to these things, and so I think what's really why I think this project is so sprawling in some ways, and why it reaches into so many types of making and so many types of even like relationship building, is not to answer that political question with one like packaged ideological response, but rather like to try to imagine possible alternative realities together. I think that's what we're trying to do.
There's Aruna D'Souza, who's actually going to be speaking about the project on the 7th at the Logan. She likes to use this term recursive to talk about history. Not that it repeats, but that it's recursive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, the first image that you see when you came in tonight was the Roman theater of Palmyra. You mentioned, and Tasha talks a lot about this, the history of Circassians. We then, like you said, know how this site was literally used as a stage for violence and execution. And then used, again, by the Russians to kind of celebrate a supposed victory in 2015. And part of what I think we've done with the project is not to ignore this history. Obviously, the history it's there and it's being included, but to try to imagine how it might become recursive and how it might get refolded into the future.
Any relation to the other Atlas group, Wally Rod and people in New York and Beirut?
That's another fictional project of ours. I've been working with Wally for 15 years now. We're about to close this.
My stage name.
Work at the Oriental Institute.
Yeah, I do. I am actually a Near Eastern archaeologist, so don't just play one here. But yeah, so Yeah, so my relationship to the project is as a builder in the Logan Center, I'm the tour guide. So I'm the person who, when you come in, I tell you all about the objects, including the things which are on loan from the Oriental Institute. You can see the horse falcon there, who now talks. He does not talk in the Oriental Institute, but here he talks. And also his replica crown, which is not normally on view, is actually on display. Those of you who will remember the sculpture prior to 1998 will actually remember the sculpture with a crown. So he's been slightly reunited, but not entirely. He gets to look at it, not wear it. So my relationship to the project was actually in 2015. I did I was the co-curator of an exhibition at the Oriental Institute on the site of Fustat, or Old Cairo, looking at the medieval site with the Muslims, Christians, and Jews living together in that area, looking at their material culture. And as an offshoot of that, I decided to do a mini exhibition on the Cairo street, because basically I was like, well, the Cairo street was right down the street, like literally. And I thought, well, we can't not do that. So I did that, and it went up. In part, there was a description with photos on the internet, and then I think Karthik and Andros found that and contacted me and said, would I like to meet with them and talk to them about the Cairo street and camels and all these things, and so it sort of developed from there.
How has it been for you playing this role? I mean, it's clearly different than what you normally do.
Well, it's not that far removed. I mean, it's a slightly different iteration, but it's not so far from who I really am. And the interesting thing with when we go around when I take people around the exhibition, at the end, they think I've gone out of character when I haven't. And so we start having a conversation, and then they start asking me questions which make it clear that they think I'm not in character anymore. And then I answer them in character, and there's a sort of pause, and suddenly then the light begins to dawn. So it's been very interesting to see how that's worked. To see, because I think because it's very close to my, what I regularly do in these kinds of things, it does tend to sort of blur for people, I think, a lot. And I guess I have that air of authority, and so people tend to think that, oh, okay, so now you're out of that, and we'll have a discussion. So no, that's not what we're doing. So it's been very interesting from that sense. But also, on another note, what's been really fascinating to me is what this is really showing me is the different ways in which we all experience objects. So of course, I experience objects from a very academic point of view, as you heard. But also the fact that, Karthik, Andros, and Jane, and Anthony, and, Sami, and Gabe, and all the other builders have all brought different things to the objects. And so when I talk to them about the objects, I start getting new senses and new ideas into those objects. So it's actually proved to be, from my, interestingly, from my academic point of view, very useful, because I've actually seen these objects in completely new ways and experiencing them in new ways. So it's been really great for me from that. So I've actually learned a lot from everyone, really, particularly Karthik and Andros.
I want to say that speaking of engaging object in different ways, when she introduced you, the archaeologist, that's like Lady Gaga, and this other crazy guy interrupted you, and you really obviously that's a fake, because it's not that they allow real antiquity, let alone from Palmyra, right around on that thing. But the thing is, it didn't was obviously, it didn't weaponize, obviously that was I didn't come here with expectations, but then she told me she was the biggest archaeologist, and looks like possible, but then looking at you, no. And the whole thing, but then I didn't realize the whole thing was narrative. Until then I saw this guy, and then the whole thing reflected again, and then I'm you are not taking me for a ride. I mean, got it, now I got this final, kind of explanation. So now I'm cut. It's fine, you can be the And this would be fine, it doesn't matter, you know, so, okay, I can go now, you know. Okay.
It's interesting what you're talking about though, because when he first corrected your pronunciation, like I didn't realize that he was part of it at first, and that awkwardness that filled the room was just kind of very palpable until I realized it was part of the same thing. But that first interaction was so, kind of took you out of place and time for a second.
It's a, you know, I think we could say it's a not so subtle, hopefully critique of mansplaining also. That Sami fell on the sword for that one, so I guess. But I also just want, before we even think about ending, I want to acknowledge the other builders that are here that have helped make this possible. Gabriel Moreno, who's working the show, and then Anthony Adcock, who actually helped work on the sculpture as well. And someone who's not with us tonight, he's in Jamaica, so that's really cool. Casey Lurie designed and made this beautiful table inspired by the Syrian table. So he's, yeah, for real.
Yeah, exactly. That's real Syrian.
No, but, yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, maybe we can wrap, and please do join us downstairs for a glass of wine. Like I said, the galleries are open late, and please go see Atlas Unlimited. It's up for 2 more weeks at the Logan Center, University of Chicago, and there's a closing reception. There's a talk next Thursday, and then a closing reception the following month.
Yeah, so it's like the closing is an act, another